Well, hello, everybody. I'm Merrylin LeBlanc, astrologer here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and host of Moonwise on KSFR, public radio here in Santa Fe in northern New Mexico, and also streaming on the web at ksfr.org. And my co host here.
Hi, welcome. I'm Michael Bartlett, professional astrologer here in Santa Fe as well. And before we even get started, I just want to say if you guys like our videos, please click on like, please subscribe, and please share with your friends. We'd like to, hopefully get a few more people interested in what we're talking about here. And please feel free to let us know if you have questions or comments and things you'd like to see us discuss. What's going on in your world today, Merrylin?
Well, this has been quite, I don't know, bombshell and fireworks in terms of excitement kind of week, a mixture of things going on. And it's kind of hard to decide which is which because I think Wednesday there was a lot of exciting news. Some of it not really bringing up excitement, such as the bombing in Beirut and then Biden electing Kamala Harris. I'd like to talk about both of those, but maybe we should start with the Beirut story, which I found really interesting. You know, we've had, and many astrologers have been talking about it, this group of planets in the sign of Capricorn, the sign that has to do with structure, and yet the energy of some of these planets that have been moving through can also deal with destructuring or eliminating, destroying that, particularly the planet Pluto, which has been there for quite a few years and will continue to be there till around 2023, 24, around in there somewhere. And joined by Saturn, which has a lot to do with structures and or restructuring, and Jupiter, which enhances both of those planets and often, preserves some of the energies that they represent or expands upon the energies that they represent. And that in the afternoon of Tuesday, Beirut time, Lebanon time, I'm not sure of the exact time, but I did a chart for that event for 5:25 p.m. Beirut, Lebanon time, Eastern European time, or not Eastern European time, but anyway, it's EET time. and to put Pluto on the ascendant, exactly on the ascendant, and Saturn in the first house, Jupiter in the 12th house. And to me, looking at that chart, it just really expanded upon the fact that nobody, not only in Lebanon, because I have a dear friend from high school, we've continued to be friends over the years, who is Lebanese, has relatives in Beirut, and she's talked to them. I talked to her the other day, and she's talked to them, and they weren't close to where the explosion was, and yet it took out a door in their home, as well as broke some glass and whatnot. So it's not just people that were in the proximity, but pretty much a lot of the city seemed to have been affected by that explosion. And to me, part of the thing, everybody says, well, what was it? And of this friend's relatives reiterated what I'd also heard on BBC and other newscasts about this, is corruption. A government that has not taken care of the safety and of its citizens, and having the Pluto, besides the destruction that it represents, it can also represent people doing things incorrectly, uh, to the advantage of themselves. It can represent corruption. I mean, we often think about the sign of Scorpio that Pluto rules. It's not in that sign, but making an aspect to that sign, which in this chart we have Pluto on the midheaven, which represents, what's going on. What is the most visible thing that is happening? And we often say a lot of good things. You and I both having Scorpio moons, we often say a lot of good things about Scorpio. We like to think that there's, but every sign has its negative points, and definitely what we see here is the corruption prevailing for everybody. It seems like people that follow the news around the world, especially in Lebanon, recognize that right away. That they've had governments that have not really represented the people, but their own interests. And and I have to smile. I see you smiling there. And just let me say one more thing. I would say this is not, in these times, this is not uncommon around the world. Yes,
Yeah, I was just
Michael.
to say, here we've got our senators who have now gone home until September, leaving the vast majority, well, not the vast majority, but a significant number of Americans without any benefits whatsoever. None are coming forward from the state at this point, so the state and the federal shut off. The eviction stay has elapsed at this point. It's really kind of scary to see these individuals who are so focused on the almighty dollar and making money for their friends while they're basically wiping out significant segments of the population economically, and therefore not allowing them to be appropriate participants in our economic system. It actually doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. Not everybody's gone back to work. And also, even the unemployment systems, they vary from state to state because each state gets to regulate it. Even that funding, early on, I've heard reports that of different states saying, we may run out of these funds if this continues. And that leaves people out of jobs, or whose jobs have been furloughed, who have been sent home and said, well, when we can reopen in full strength, we'll reemploy you. That leaves all those people in the lurch.
Or the people have to stay home because their kids aren't able to go to school and they don't have, you can't afford daycare. I mean, it's interesting, I've been thinking lately after the last few days, there's an interesting thing that happens with Pluto, and I like that you named it. And since we're kind of in this wonderful free flowing thing, Pluto is, considered like the great and terrible simplification. And it's interesting because what's going on right now is this almost a distillation. We're all going through this, we're all kind of being cooped up in our homes or being put into positions that really aren't that comfortable, but it's kind of forcing us to kind of look at ourselves and kind of say, hey, you know what is it that's right for me? How can I make this work? What is it that's going to do? How can I survive this time? And I think out of times like this, out of great desperation, some amazing things can happen. But I'm scared of like what that desperation causes for people who really, who don't have any food on their table and who are really worried about being evicted. I don't know what this is going to mean, economic, and the ripple effect is going to be pretty phenomenal when these people aren't paying the rent. The landlords want to get rid of them because they're not paying rent, but it's like, there might not be other people to replace them who don't have money either to pay. So
right. And many of the landlords too need that income. That's been their income to pay their bills, their mortgages.
Yep.
Not all of them are in the black in terms of how they've been operating. So it's not, you can't point the finger necessarily at landlords in terms they're stuck also.
No, that's a really good point. Thanks for saying that. Yep.
And you're reminding me too, during our lifetimes, all of the people that are still alive here on the planet, for the most part, except somebody who might be, late 90s into their hundreds, we've had the planet Neptune roughly in a sextile, sometimes in a septile, that's 51 degrees versus 60 degrees apart. And some of the
With
some of this abuse, I think, is related to Neptune and Pluto together, because one on the downside with Neptune, it's not all about ideals and visualizations and what we can dream up in our lives and our spiritual lives. It also includes um, one of the common factors that sometimes it includes, especially when we look at its natural house, is imprisonment. And imprisonment or confinement, because even, on a mundane level, convents and monasteries fit into the same category with prisons, and the commonality is confinement. And yet there's the underdog, the oppressed also fit into that category because they're confined as well. This is the great metaphoric system of astrology. Great example of it, I think. So anyway, in that chart I did, Jupiter's in its one of its natural houses, bringing up that, but also this sextile. Sextiles, sextiles are like, in a cyclical phase, and I do the moon phases, sextiles are part of the crescent phase. That, when the crescent phase begins, it begins at 45 degrees and goes through to 90 degrees in terms of the cycle, a circle. And by the time we hit the 60-degree point, if we've made a decision to follow a new course of action, and in this case of Pluto and Neptune, it would have been begun back in around 1895-ish. I might have a year or two off there. It's a 500-year cycle, so it's still in its waxing phases. But if we made a decision back, when it was entered this crescent phase, and I can't remember the dates, but it was, after the turn of the century, sometime in there in the early 1900s. Lots of that energy with the crescent phase get reinforced. And I'm thinking about this cycle, which began, during the Baron robbers, the moneyed people, the Gilded Age, they called it, the Gilded Age. And you can't help but think that some of that is still pushing on a very strong level. It's still pushing forward, but there is opposition to it, and opposition, over the 19th or 20th century, 1900s, opposition is shown up here and there. But we go into the 21st century, and the Gilded Age is back with us again.
And in a very
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in a very interesting way too, because what was interesting, the Gilded Age is what led to that unbridled speculation, is what led to the Great Depression, the stock market crash. And so after that happened, there were all this legislation, all these governors, if you will, put in place to help keep the economy protected. And over the years, especially since the Reagan era, all those rules were completely dismantled. And so now you're seeing, the difference between now and the robber baron years is, at least back in the robber baron years, there was an understanding that you should kind of maybe give back a little bit. The wealth that's being generated now, and it's such a crazy level, and it's such a disproportionate rate to the rest of people on the planet, is they're not giving back for the most part.
Well, just to be a little kind to them, Bill Gates started this foundation and encouraged other billionaires to do similar things. Yes. Comment.
So like when you, like we talked about last time, like when you account for the fact that, when they donate $1 billion, they're taking money out of giving to the rest of our system. And so therefore, they're having a benefit and they're getting to do things. Why aren't they being, who needs more than $1 billion really? on the planet? Why after a billion, there's someone who's out there saying, after you get $1 billion, the rest of it should be taken away. You have some kind of control in dispersing it, but who really needs more than that? I mean, now there's this weird, Pluto Jupiter or Pluto Neptune. I mean, there's this idealized accumulation, right? There's this accumulation of power, accumulation of wealth. We're seeing this 1%. They made this pledge, like you said, to give away half of their wealth. Well, they're now all worth more than double what they were worth when they did that pledge. Why aren't they paying the people at the lower part of their organizations more appropriate wages, so they aren't having to live in their vans and their cars in the parking lots of the places where they work in the Bay Area and Seattle? Why aren't they donating and creating like more affordable housing? And instead of creating these little interesting guarded communities, I mean, here again, this idealized thing, the wealthy people are buying up these little interesting spots like in Utah and private islands, and they're making these little things, for the end of the world so they can survive it. Like, who wants to live in a world that's like that? Why don't we create a world where everyone is doing well and we don't have to worry about like, surviving through these bad areas, when it's like, why doesn't everyone deserve, there's enough for everyone here. Why aren't we sharing?
This is spoken like a positive Scorpio moon. We, the two of us kind of this is all very scorpionic, related to Pluto and Mars and its connections to these other planets, and now Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. But every sign, we can't say this enough, every sign, every planet has its positive and negative. And what just came out of your mouth, Michael, actually represents a more positive expression of Scorpio, because it is highest expression. It is about sharing. It's seeking that perfect kind of sharing that and I don't mean like necessarily equal, you get two, I get two, etc. It's more, like what feels equal, because everything doesn't have exactly the same value. And yeah, we could definitely use more of that. We remind you. Go ahead.
I was going to say,
Go ahead. You wanted to say something on this.
It rules the 8th house, which is the sign of or the house of other people's resources, inheritance. So it's like, why aren't we all inheriting? Why is it just certain individuals get to inherit this incredible amount of wealth and not have to live with the anxiety so many of the rest of us have to live with on a daily basis about how it is to survive on the planet in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and why does inheritance go from generation to generation to generation to generation, so that we have people living today solely off of trust funds that were started by their great 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 grandfather or mother, etc. And I mean, and actually, what is our true inheritance as human beings? The next sign from Scorpio is Sagittarius, which tells us it's more our culture, it's more our, what gifts do we get from our culture, from our beliefs, be it our religions or our social beliefs, how we think. Those are more our true gifts. What we've learned, what concepts have we learned to live by. Those are, from a whole chart perspective, those are more, what they talk about. Yes.
Well, some of the other energies that are going on right now are pretty significant. I mean, squaring that energy right now is Mars in Aries. And so I think, we're seeing these movements, we're seeing these actions, like that explosion is an example of that, and then their whole government resigning. I mean, that, to be honest, actually struck me as more powerful than the fact that they'd been acting without integrity for so long, is they actually, kind of stepped up to the plate, and it'd be interesting. I think, to be honest, what happens to me over time, and I've just felt this my whole life, like the show South Park, where the kids actually have a little more going on than the adults. Like, I've just had the experience my whole life, like going, when the hell are the adults going to show up? And it's that kind of old saying, is like, we have to be the adults. We have to be the ones who say, enough is enough. And as more people deal with living on a level of survival and not having, I mean, it's interesting, the thing that happened in Chicago this week too, the looting and the rioting happened on Miracle Mile. Those weren't the people living in the homeless shelters breaking those. Those were like, quote, middle class individuals. I mean, whatever middle class means anymore, because that of course is shrinking. But it's like, those were individuals who just basically went in there because they're like, we're just going to go and take it from these corporations. We're seeing this, this idealized corporation that is so nameless that people can take from it all the time. I mean, we see it, it's kind of in our culture, take advantage of the insurance company, whether it's your car insurance or your medical insurance. Doctors and, and physicians and others are overbilling Medicare and other insurance because they're not getting paid enough. There's this weird sense of entitlement, and like, how can we step away from the sense of like how we need to take from something and replace it with the fact of like it being enough? How do we get to, I mean, I think that's what this Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter opportunity is giving us with Mars scoring. Is like, hey, we have to do something different. Chiron's in there too in Aries, and saying, what, the wound, we have to, that meanness, that self-centering aspect of fire, it needs to be shifted. We need to heal the ways we perceive ourselves and understand that who we are as individuals does not, none of us can exist separately from everyone else. We need to be able to have people who grow our food. We need someone who, builds our housing for us. We need someone who provides our utilities and our electricities for those of us who live in buildings and in homes. I mean, we are all completely interdependent. And this weird, when you talk about that Pluto-Neptune combination, it's this weird self-aggrandizement of the individual to such an extent that it doesn't think it needs anyone. It's Ebenezer Scrooge, right? It's this person who like, oh, bah, humbug. But then when you realize like, oh my God, and it actually just gives me goosebumps, when we take a moment, I think, the world is being given a moment right now to see what is truly important. We're not able to be with the people we love. We're not able to be with our friends. We're not able to be with our family members. We're not able to be with these people who really touch us and move us. Children aren't able to be in classrooms, being able to be kids and exchanging and socializing in that normal way we do. We're all being like forced to kind of go like, wow. In fact, I was just thinking about it yesterday, all the, the soccer moms, all the parents who are so full every single day doing their regular jobs, and on top of it, doing all these things about taking care of their kids. Not only are they not doing that, they're at home with their kids having these experiences. What is it that we've created that we really wanted, and what is it that we've created that really doesn't suit us? It maybe comes from these ideas that have come from the past, like, oh, what, I have to go forth, I have to get married, I have to have children, each of these rights, the rights of humanity. I'm happy to be a gay man because like I always felt that I had this freedom of not having to be like stuck in that box of like, oh, well, now it's time to get married, and now it's time to have kids, and now it's, like, no, I want to like, life is about experiencing, about having these things that aren't necessarily these rules that society has put on us. And now everyone's being given that opportunity.
Yes, we've left the agrarian age. We've moved into an information age where much is available to us and many lifestyles are available to us. And back to this chart I mentioned at the very beginning, this chart at different times of the day can represent anywhere in the world, actually, not just in Beirut. And one of the things about this chart, when Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn were all there, close to the ascendant, is that it put that Mars that you were talking about in the third house. And the third house represents our local environments. And when you talked about Chicago versus Beirut or whatever, one other thing, I mean, there was strife and discord happening in all of those, and Mars is approaching. It's very close. Matter of fact, today it might be there. I haven't looked at today's transits exactly because looking at Tuesdays, today being Friday. Mars is approaching uh, the asteroid or planetoid, I'm not sure what she's called, Eris, the goddess of discord and strife. And you know, whether it's in the neighborhoods or whether, you know, it's any, you know, whatever, it's happening in close proximities to all of us. You know, and this energy, because it's packed with that energy from these outer planets that move very slowly. That energy is coming out through Mars, it's coming out through the moon, it's coming out, you know, through where the sun is, and in
Yeah, by
different
trine and
ways. Yeah,
sextile. Yeah,
yeah.
it's actually, it's volatile. It's support. I mean, it's like, to me, it's interesting because then you have the sun with Mercury. So in Leo, so there's something about us needing to share, you know, what our individual stories are. I mean, you and I talked a little bit earlier on, you know, there's this interesting thing as we all know about Black Lives Matter and the protests that are going on all around the country, not only in our country, but around the world, in a sense of solidarity. But then what I find is very odd is that on top of all this is that we still have like a president who can make slurs about women, you know, calling a woman, you know, Pocahontas, or calling, you know, finding these degrading ways to, you know, like debase women, and now, you know, questioning whether, you know, Kamala, you know, Biden's running mate can actually run as vice president because, you know, she's, you know, her parents were immigrants, and it's like, who is Trump married to?
He
Isn't
doesn't
Trump
even,
married to someone who's an immigrant? I mean, so, you know, then
right, but
his
he doesn't
children
even
are
quote,
allowed to be
he's
here.
not quoting, but he doesn't even say things that are constitutional. I mean, she was born in this country. She has a legal right. Her parents chose to have her be an American citizen. She had a right to choose that when I forget what age. Yeah,
It's the same doubt they put the whole time through for Obama. You know, it's
or,
this,
right,
you know,
exactly.
it's
I mean,
this interesting thing. And, you know, the scary part is, and I think we talked about this last time, is this fake news, which again, you know, if there's anything that's fake news, I mean, you talk about Pluto and Neptune together. I mean, that's, and then with, especially with all those planets in Capricorn, it's like, this is, we're going to say what it is. And, you know, it's funny, like we as human beings have this amazing ability to hear what people say. Like my dad used to say something, believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you see, which is a really interesting thing with these combination of energies, because, you know, especially nowadays, you know, this idea of fake news. But then I was thinking back, you know, being a gay man, like I referenced earlier, you know, I think about Liberace or Walter Mercado, you know, these really flamboyant, you know, Elton John, Freddie Mercury. Oh, well, I'm not gay, you know, da 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 da. But, you know, saying one thing, but then actually being something else because society doesn't want to hear that. And so there's this interesting thing where I think politicians understand this double speak that they have to do. They have to speak out of one side of their mouth for the vast majority of humans to see things in a certain way. And then they have to speak out of another side of their mouth for, you know, for other reasons. And, you know, this interesting game because, you know, a lot of people just want to, you know, like right now, you know, just because the stock market's doing great, you know, there are a lot of people in our country who believe like the economy is doing great. Well, like, I'm sorry, the economy isn't doing great if we have millions of people out of work, worried about getting evicted, not having, you know, not being able to work because they can't, because they've got to take care of their children. Like, does it have to be your children for you to be able to understand that's going on in the country?
no, but you know, when you said, you know, the politicians and their double speak, we had this interesting same day announcement last Tuesday of Kamala Harris being Joe Biden's pick to be the vice president. And I ran off their charts, and tell me, which, 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 which of these two people I'm going to name would you tend to believe what comes out of their mouths more than the other? One who has Mercury in the 12th house, and you could describe those placements and tell me which, and one that has Mercury in the 5th house. I'm not telling you which one if you haven't looked at the charts. And if you have, don't tell us.
Well, the fifth one, obviously, is going to be, they can be creative in the way they're expressing things. It's going to be a little more self-centering and self-expressive. The one in the 12th house, to me, I'm a little more, I have 12th house moon and Neptune, so there's a way I have
I was
comfort
going
around
to say
it.
you should be a little more compassionate about 12.
Yeah, compassion, but there's a way that I think someone from the 12th house can hear and understand things from the collective that's really good, but maybe might not be seen as a good speaker in front of people.
All right. So which one do you think has the 12th house Mercury?
Oh my God, I can kind of see both of them having kind of these interesting things of both. I think Biden, because he seems like a little more quiet about it. Did I get it
You're
right?
absolutely right.
Oh yeah? Okay. And when you think about it, it's one of those things that where people, they want to believe him, right? But I think of Mercury in the 12th house as being a little bit like, the Wizard of Oz, someone talking behind the scenes a little more. But there is a benefit of it. There is a way that they do understand the collective. And one thing that's been really great about him all along is he's always stressing about walking across the aisle. He's always talking about inclusivity. He's always talking about bringing, having something that's understandable. Kamala, what I like about her, she wasn't afraid to let her lion roar. And I think that, to be honest, the fact that he picked her as a running mate shows a level of not only respect, but an understanding that, it's good to have someone on your side who's willing to call you on your stuff.
I want to stop there for a minute. You have really described certain placements for each of those. Biden has Mars, Mercury, Sun, and Venus in the 12th house. And the inclusiveness that you just talked about, this is that placement. That's part of the expression of that placement. Whereas talking about Kamala and, just roaring like a lion, she has Sun, Mercury, and Neptune in the 5th house. So you did this. Are you sure you didn't look at their charts?
I actually haven't seen either one. I have to say I haven't seen either one of their charts, but it's like one of those things you can kind of touch into a little bit. But wow, that actually it kind of gives me goosebumps. That's a nice combo for the two of them. It makes for a powerful, formidable team, really.
Oh yes, definitely that. Kamala Harris is a Libra sun, and the sun representing leadership ability, and Joe is the Scorpio sun. And we talked about Scorpio earlier when we were talking about all the destruction and also comparing our Scorpio moons and how we tend to want to share more than a lot of the negative energy that we've been seeing around the planet. And I would say that Joe Biden and his relationship to his partners in the Senate and as vice president and his concern for the American people represents that sharing nature of Scorpio. And, he joins, let's see, I wrote this somewhere. Yes, here. He joins 5 other Scorpio sun presidents: John Adams, our second president, James Polk, James Garfield, Teddy Roosevelt, and Warren Harding. And Kamala, is a Libra sun, all in the 5th house, also has it supports her as an attorney, and she's been a district attorney and attorney general, and that sense. Libra and Sagittarius are 2 signs that have to do with law. Libra is more about justice, and Sagittarius is more about jurisprudence, the laws that are made by man. And so she, this kind of balances that out. And she joins Rutherford, what was his last name? Hayes, Chester Arthur, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Jimmy Carter, one of my favorite former presidents.
One of the oldest ones.
One of the oldest ones right now, who is still sharing his talents and abilities with Habitat for Humanity. Yes.
Yeah, one of our oldest sold presidents in a long time. It wasn't really popular, but you can tell like his depth of being. But it's interesting, when you talk about Biden, then with that sun in Scorpio, remember there was that little thing about him being like inappropriate. The hard part is a lot of times Scorpio can be called inappropriate because it wants to feel people, wants to be connected with.
Wants to be intimate, and intimacy doesn't necessarily mean sex.
Right,
But
exactly.
there is that closeness that it enjoys with other people.
Exactly.
Whether that's sharing secrets, sharing information that is just between the two or three or more.
Okay. But what's exciting, like I think of those two compared to like Trump and Pence, who can't be left alone in a room by himself. Like, I don't know that's like one of the creepiest things they've ever heard from an adult who isn't behind bars.
Yeah, right. Well, hopefully we will. People are asking, well, how do you feel about his choice? I am delighted with his choice. Um, I I actually just, compared Kamala to other presidents because she could easily become the next president in this case if things happen in the Democrats' favor this year, which right now the poll, who knows, anything can happen between now and election day. But I was, I guess, partly looking at what are the possibilities of a person being elected. Usually there's connections to the United States key charts,
Always.
whether it's the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution chart, which we should talk about someday. I've never actually had a discussion on that with another astrologer. But yeah, so these are exciting, interesting times that we're living in. We didn't think they would be we always thought this election year would be an exciting election year, but throw in the COVID, which definitely fits in with the planetary energies that we've been mostly talking about this today. Yeah.
And also what's going on with the Postal Service. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting, we're not in for quiet times for another couple of years. I mean, I think, for those of you who are out there wanting, advice on how to handle things is like, try and find ways to make your life and yourself as stable as possible. These are going to be, there's going to be great opportunities, but there's going to be great loss. There's going to be great change along with those. And we need to find ways of supporting one another, really work on your relationship, your friendships. We're gonna all have to be helping one another through these times. I really don't know how else we're gonna make it, because it's not gonna be about doing it on our own.
We're all in this together.
We are. And so if anyone wants to reach you, how can they reach you, Merrylin?
I'm available at area code 505-690-1878, or you can email me, Merrylin LeBlanc at gmail.com, or moonwise@ksfr.org. Don't forget to check out that show. It airs on Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time, but there's always the podcasts at ksfr.org. Under the program tab, you'll find podcasts, and they're listed alphabetically.
Great. My name is Michael Bartlett. You can reach me at 505-690-3860. My website is coremichael.com, where I like to write articles and have free information. Again, please click like, please subscribe, please share with your friends if you enjoy this and find insight. And, if you have a topic about astrology or something that's going on in the world right now and you'd be interested in hearing have us talk about it, please feel free to email us and let us know what your thoughts. Otherwise, sending out the best to everyone out there, and have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Yes. Bye. See you later.